Some breaking political news overnight, an upset in the race for governor of Louisiana. Voters elected Democrat John Bel Edwards over Republican Senator David Vitter, who was badly hurt by his 2007 prostitution scandal. Edwards is the first Democrat elected governor in the Deep South in 12 years. Vitter announced he will not seek re-election to the Senate. This week was a chance for former Secretary of State and Democratic frontrunner Hillary Clinton to display her foreign policy chops in the wake of the terror attacks in Paris and Mali. In our latest Fox News poll, Clinton maintains her commanding lead over her rivals in the Democratic field. And we're back now with the panel. Well, let's start with Clinton, who gave a foreign policy speech this week in which she certainly talked tougher than President Obama about how to take on ISIS, but didn't give a lot of specifics about how she would actually be tougher. Here she is.
Our goal is not to deter or contain ISIS, but to defeat and destroy ISIS.
Kirsten, whatever Clinton says, if the world is still a mess a year from now, won't she be blamed for her role in the Obama foreign policy?
Certainly people are going to try to blame her, but I think what she'll do is she will say, you know, I wasn't actually in charge. Barack Obama was in charge. I actually disagreed with him on certain things, as she has already said. She disagreed with him on Syria, for example, and that she would have done things differently. And I think that she's, you know, going to ask people to look at her. And I think there was a really distinct difference between her and President Obama, even if you say it's just in tone and what she's saying. Look, Republicans have been saying it matters what you say, it matters how you talk about this. Well, she talks about it in a very different way than President Obama does. And I think that she's going to try to make it clear that she's very different than him.
George, do you think that the Secretary of State for the first 4 years of Barack Obama's time in office can say, I really was just kind of a bystander?
Or that I disagreed with him, because on two matters she not only agreed with him, but she was the main driver of this. One was the reset with Russia, which has now been subsequently busy dismembering a nation in the center of Europe, Ukraine, and also in Libya, an illegal, unwise intervention by the United States that has created a failed state in that region. It seems to me, and we're going to have a repeat of 1980. In 1980, a week before the election, Ronald Reagan stands on the stage and says to the American people, ask yourself the question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? In 2016, whoever the Republican nominee is going to stand on that stage and ask the American people this: is there any place in the world where American power is more respected and where the world is better off than it was when Mrs. Clinton became Secretary of State? It will be, I think, a devastating question.
Meanwhile, the Republican candidates this week got into a kind of bidding war about who can be tougher on the Syrian refugees, and once again it was the two Republican frontrunners leading the pack. Here they are.
Should there be a database system that tracks the Muslims here in this country?
There should be a lot of systems beyond database. I mean, we should have a lot of systems.
Muslims specifically, how do you actually get them registered into a database?
It would be just good management. What you have to do is good management procedures.
If there's a rabid dog running around your neighborhood, you're probably not going to assume something good about that dog.
Michael, there's some debate whether Trump actually did or didn't call for a Muslim database, but I got a bigger question than that, and that is at a time when it seems like the Obama-Clinton foreign policy is, and I don't think I'm overstating, is in shambles. Shouldn't the Republicans want to focus on that rather than their rhetoric?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he didn't call for a database. It was a gaffe. I think Byron York of the Washington Examiner wrote a great piece kind of piecing it together. But the burden's going to be on Trump and Carson now to put forth their actual plans to show that they have policies that rise to the occasion, that can take the argument to Obama and to Clinton about how this isn't working out. I think clearly Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are going to be strengthened by this. They have experience. They've been in the Senate. They've been dealing with foreign policy issues on this. But the debate, as George said, about is there any part of this country, of this world, that is safer now after 8 years of Obama and Clinton, is what this election is going to be about. It's going to be a major theme, and it's going to be up to Trump and Carson to show that their policy can back up the Republican place on that.
Yeah, but interesting, because it seems to me that the bottom line after this quite remarkable week, the headline is that for all of his controversial statements, for all of the new focus on who would be the best commander-in-chief, put up the poll, because it's awfully interesting. And as you can see there, Donald Trump continues to lead the pack and, in fact, has widened his lead, leads by 10 points. Juan?
Well, it's hard to, you come to someone like me, and what I do for a living is I look at polls and I talk to political experts in Washington, and you know what? They're all baffled, Chris. Nobody understands how Donald Trump's doing that. I think on the Paris thing, it's clear he's a strong, reassuring voice. He may not have a strategy other than bomb the, smithereens out of him. And
that's cleaning it up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, and then he goes on and he says things like, the business about the registry or closing mosques, and people say, what about, our First Amendment rights, our religious liberties in this country? It doesn't seem to bother. I think he once was defined as a radical outlier in the Republican Party by people like me. I now more and more see him as representing the feeling of economic anxiety, distrust of government, anger at President Obama in the Republican ranks. He has captured that. And I think he's always finding somebody to blame, whether it's the Mexican immigrants or the Chinese for their money manipulation, or Wall Street for taking jobs away from working class whites. This is who the heart of the Republican Party is at this moment. And I think you have to just say the Democrats would be happy to run against him.
It's not the heart of the Republican Party. It's the heart of the entire American electorate, which feels unheard in Washington, D.C. They are right to feel unheard in Washington, D.C. because they are, in fact, unheard in Washington, D.C. And I think that part of Donald Trump's attraction is that he's provided bold leadership. There's other people in the field who've done that also. But it's not just a Republican thing.
I think it is mostly Republican, Michael. You don't see on the Democratic side, even on the Sanders people, who would be the populist opposite, you don't see this kind of anger, for example, at the immigrants that we were earlier talking about, allowing children and women and 60-year-olds into the country. This is playing out in the Republican primary right now, and I think that's where it is, not on the Democratic side.
No, look, there's no anger at immigrants or anything else. There are people out there who feel completely unheard by a political system that works for well-connected insiders and don't work for people on the outside.
No,
that's something that fuels Bernie Sanders.
I hear that, but you don't think that Trump is driven by anti-immigrant fervor in this country?
I think Trump is driven by people who want bold leadership. And I think that's why you have 63% of the Republican electorate looking for people like Trump and Carson and Cruz, outsiders.
Thank you, panel. See you next Sunday. I have a feeling we'll continue this conversation.